We are on to national questions and answers, part 3. And let's review what you just read. Of the 5 antitrust laws, and remember, antitrust laws are going to be anything that would create a monopoly or restrict the free flow of goods and services. There are a total of 5 antitrust laws. There is price fixing, group boycott. Number 3 is allocation of a market, which would be like Urbandale, Clyde, like a certain area. Number 4 would be allocation of a customer, which is the type of customer. And number 5 is a tying agreement. And I would say on the exam, you could have anywhere between 2 and 4 test questions just about antitrust laws. And that will fall under the category of practice of real estate. And the antitrust law that says, I will only sell you this product if you buy this one as well. It forces you to do one piece of business you don't really want in order to get what you really do want. That is known as a tying agreement or a tie-in agreement. You could have this question on the national or state exam. An express contract can be oral or written, but obviously to be held up in law, in writing is always better. However, there is something called the Statute of Frauds that says that in order to be valid, there are certain types of contracts that must be in writing. So real estate contracts are those. So seller representation agreements, purchase agreements, or you might call it sales contract, and leases are some examples of those that are required to be in writing. The risk of an implied agency agreement is that you may intentionally lead that client to believe that you have their best interests in mind, where you just think you're giving out helpful advice. And this could create litigation for you if that customer at some point feels misinformed. Does agency in a real estate transaction, is that formed by who pays the commission or any other compensation? So as a reminder, when you list a property with the seller, in your seller representation agreement, you are going to determine the commission that is charged to your client for services. Hypothetically only, let's say I list a property and the seller and I negotiate 6%. And I hope you always win in that, because you should be really good at negotiating. But anyway, I digress. Let's say I negotiate 6%. Then I go on to a system like the multiple listing service, where I'm a member of a local board of realtors, and I put that listing for sale. And I say to all of the other agents in my office and all the other co-brokerages that are a member of that multiple listing service, hey, somebody that's got a buyer, if you bring me a buyer, I will share X% with you at the time of closing. So let's say I list it for 6, I'm going to advertise it on the MLS that I'm willing to share 3% of that, half of it, with the party that brings me the buyer. Then at closing, my broker is going to keep 3%, share a check with the buyer's broker for 3%, and then each of those brokers are going to pay us according to our independent contractor agreement. Long story long, the seller is the one that paid that commission, but does the buyer's agent owe them any duties? Not unless they are dual agency. Otherwise, I can represent the seller, another agent can represent the buyer, and then that other agent on the buyer's side owes no loyalty other than to work in good faith and honesty. They owe no loyalty to my seller. Only I owe loyalty to my seller. Fiduciary responsibilities. This is going to be care, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, accounting, confidentiality. And again, my acronym for this is COLD AC. These agent fiduciary responsibilities are of special trust that you put with a client when you're working with them. And you're putting their interests above your own. You are following their lawful instruction. You are accountable for any funds that come in to your possession on their behalf. And you don't disclose anything to another party that might put them at a disadvantage when negotiating. You keep their affairs confidentiality. And because you are a licensed agent, the public assumes that you know more than the average Joe. So that's where the idea of care comes into place. I would know each of these 6 elements by definition and also an example. This question here about these fiduciary responsibilities is going to fall under the category of agency. And with that, I would say just on these fiduciary responsibilities, you could anticipate 4 or 5 test questions, which would be half almost of the number of agency questions you'll have on the exam. You'll have 10 on agency on the national exam. What is the difference between a general, universal, and special agent? And I will say, if we're really being picky, I should have put this in the order of special. Universal means you can do anything and everything on behalf of the owner. It might be an asset manager, or it might be a power of attorney. A general agent is going to do a lot of activities for a property owner, but it's also restricted to just those properties. So a general agent is going to be similar to a property manager. A special agent acts only in a specific transaction. So let's say I help someone purchase a property, and then I help that same person sell their current property. I'm representing them as a buyer and then as a seller. That is not a general agent because I did both of those business managers. It's actually a special agent twice. Another word that we're going to use for that is a single agent, where I represented them and only them in each of those transactions. In single agency, who is the selling agent's client? Again, selling agency is with the buyer side, listing agency is with the seller. Loyalty to 2 principals in the same transaction, that is dual agency. That is 1, 2, 3 Banana Street. And I represent both the buyer and the seller in that transaction. And again, dual agency, that must always be disclosed no matter what. Now, you've got a long list. I think we reviewed this maybe 3 different times in the material of when an agency agreement, a seller representation agreement, or a buyer representation agreement would terminate. Expiration is an option. Death of either party, and either party, that's broker or client. Death or incapacitation of either party. Foreclosure, bankruptcy, destruction. These are all great answers, but your first opportunity to end those agreements is completion of sale. You had a closing, you did the job that they hired you for, you did it faster than to the extent and last date on the contract, you made a commission. A stigmatized property is a property that's found undesirable because of a certain event or something in the surrounding area that's happened. And I don't know whether it's on this list, but it popped into my brain, so I'm going to put it out there. Because in this same section, we learned something called Megan's Law. That might be a random test question for you under practice of real estate that says sex offenders must register where they're going to be living. Okay. Listing agreements, seller representation agreements. This is going to be another big chunk of questions under agency. Again, there's 10 agency questions. And in a listing contract where the listing broker receives a commission, no matter who sells the property, that's an exclusive right to sell. The one that is established by procuring cause, because multiple brokers have been hired, it's going to be the broker that sells it. Now, here's what I want to review for you really quick, even though it's not on here. Bonus. If you've got any sort of agreement, whether it's buyer or seller, that uses the word exclusive in it, exclusive buyer agency, exclusive right to sell, or exclusive agency, one thing I want you to keep in mind is, when can you approach them to do business with them? Maybe you've seen them struggling getting their home sold. You know you could do much better. But when can you approach them? And the answer is, you cannot approach them until it expires, unless the seller approaches you first. And then you can create your own seller representation agreements from the date it expires until whatever days you agree that it should expire for your contract. A broker protection clause. This protects the broker so that a seller does not hijack all of the leads that you created, all the buyer leads you created during your listing efforts and money. Wait until it expires in 2 weeks and I'll sell it to you on the cheap. We don't want sellers saying that to your buyer prospects that you again spent the time and money to attract. This is a simple commission equation. 5% divided into 16,250 is going to give you a list price of $320. The next question says, if a contract is a voluntary agreement for a legal purpose, what's the difference between a bilateral and a unilateral? Well, bilateral and a unilateral must contain all the valid elements of a contract. A unilateral contract, though, is when one party is just holding still, the other party is doing the activity. Bilateral would be a purchase agreement. I've agreed to buy your property for $300,000. And in exchange, you're going to give me clear title and fix the furnace. Unilateral is where I make you an offer, and then I decide whether I'm going to exercise my right to purchase it or not. So you're just holding there tight. That is called an option contract. Let's go down here to void, voidable, or valid. Valid means it contains all the elements, and on the surface looks like it is for realsies. It's good to go. But when we've got issues come up, now is it void or voidable? Void is going to happen with fraud, or if someone was already declared legally incompetent in a court of law. I think in my example with you, I've used the past conservatorship that Britney Spears was a part of. Hashtag free Britney has now, I believe, been hashtag freed. Amanda Bynes is another celebrity that has been put into a conservatorship. Anything they sign would be immediately void. However, voidable is going to deal with folks that declare temporary insanity, under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or are a minor. A minor is a voidable contract, not void, voidable. A novation and an assignment. An assignment is a substitution of a buyer where all terms of the contract remain the same. And just like a novation, all the contract's terms remain the same, including accepted states and timelines. But a novation is a substitution of a new offer, usually simply because we couldn't read the original, or too many things been scratched out and initialed, and it wasn't clear what was actually agreed upon. So you know verbally, but maybe someone else can't interpret it or read it, like the lender. A counteroffer. When an offer comes in on a purchase for real estate, one of 5 things can happen. Okay, wish me luck. I'm going to work from memory here. An offer comes in, and the offer can either be accepted by the seller, it can be rejected by the seller. Maybe they decided to go with another offer. The buyer can rescind their offer or withdraw it before it is accepted, or sorry, before it's accepted or the offer, number 4, expires. So a purchase agreement should have an expiration date that the buyer expects the seller to reply. So we've got accept it, reject it, the buyer withdraws it, it expires, and the 5th one is a counteroffer. The seller counters the offer. And the definition of a counteroffer means the original no longer exists. Okay. Means the original no longer exists. Now on to an addendum and an amendment. And an addendum adds information, and amendment changes it. So let's say you and I get a purchase agreement together. I'm going to buy your house for $300,000. We're going to close on the 16th. And we've agreed that you're going to give me a 10-day window to do a home inspection with a person of my choosing at my expense. The inspector comes in, goes through their list of things that they inspect, and we find that the furnace is broken. I approach you under contract and say, to move forward, I would like this furnace repaired. And you come back and say, yes, as a seller, I will fix this furnace. We will add that fact that you will fix the furnace. And by the way, I would add that it be done prior to closing with receipts provided, and it be done by a licensed professional, especially for plumbing and electrical. That's a little additional hint for you. We're going to put on an addendum that additional information that you as a seller agree to make that repair. An amendment would change something. Maybe the closing date, you all agree that it's not probable that you're going to be able to close on that date because of an issue. You would change that date because of an amendment. I'm going to add a 3rd thing here that I know I've mentioned in a previous video around a bill of sale. A bill of sale would be where personal property goes. Personal property cannot go on a sales contract because that is for real estate. It's not for couches, pool tables, dressers. If those things are to remain with the property, or the buyer agrees to purchase them from the seller, fine, but it goes on a bill of sale. Voluntary and involuntary liens. We maybe didn't spend a lot of time on this, but we did talk a lot about general and specific liens. General liens are things that you just get for being you. Judgments, alimony, child support. A specific lien is going to be a mortgage, utility, or a mechanic's lien, which would be put in place by someone that you had parts and labor done. And with that, some of those are voluntary and involuntary. And really a voluntary lien, you most often choose like a mortgage, like you chose to have that lien there. Or maybe you got a bail bond lien. You chose to use your house as collateral to get that debt. Most everything else is going to be involuntary. And then, of course, we just discussed this lien being general or specific. And a judgment would be, and a great example of a general lien. A mortgage would be a great example of a specific lien. And remember, only specific liens rise to the level of an encumbrance. So a judgment, while it is a lien, would not be an encumbrance because it's not specific. A mill is a 1/1000th. Percent is a 1/100th, but a mill is a 1/1000th. And a mill is a number used to calculate and multiplied by an assessed value in order to determine the property tax amount for a homeowner. That could be a math question for you. And again, I think we've hit this one pretty hard. That judgment, again, it is voluntary and specific. No, a judgment is general and it's an involuntary lien. And then as a reminder, what is PITI? This is a little teaser for us. In our part 4, we'll get more into mortgage, but PITI stands for principal, taxes, and insurance. And those are the 4 elements that make up a person's mortgage payment. And again, we are on to national part 4, which is the last part for the national content.